Just the thought of facing your own inner shadow can be scary as hell. You might think that you don't have what it takes. You might be too scared to even consider it. You might have no idea where to even begin. Or you might have decided already to shove it away somewhere in a very dark place and hope to hell that it stays there for good. But what I've learned on my own journey to heal from my own complex trauma was that the very thing that I was trying to control was actually controlling me, my shadow. And as I began to face my shadow, all my emotions, my belief systems, my conditionings, my patterns, my old stories that I've told myself, I finally began to get in touch with my authentic self, the one who I had kept hidden from the world all this time. Hi everyone, I want to welcome you back to Carole Cares. And in this video in particular, I'm going to show you how I face my own shadow in order to heal my complex trauma. And I'm going to do this by giving you the 4 ways that I use myself in order to do shadow work. And I'm also going to give you videos to show you how to do each step. And then, once you start doing this, once you commit yourself to these 4 ways, you're definitely going to start to see your life heading in a new direction. So what is the shadow self? The shadow self is that part of us that Swiss psychologist Carl Jung first introduced in 1945. He defined the shadow as the thing a person has no wish to be. And that is what most of us are running from, unfortunately, our own shadow. So when you were young, as a young child, an adolescent, there were adults in your life, whether it's your caretakers, teachers, relatives, told you things either about your behavior, about the emotions you were displaying, about things you liked or disliked, and they commented on that. And what happens is, as a child, you took these comments. So if they had told you that you were a crybaby, or you were overly sensitive, or you wouldn't be able to do a certain thing, or you can't do a certain thing. So these are all these ideas and these belief systems that you put away, you shoved them away because you weren't allowed to have them, you weren't allowed to think them, you weren't allowed to feel them. So any ideas or dreams that you would have, and a lot of times we don't even remember what they were, because if you were to ask me what my dreams were when I was younger, I don't know, but it's because we've shoved them away. So if, for example, if you came from a life with a lot of trauma, and all of us have trauma on a continuum, you can have some trauma or you can have a lot of trauma. So all of these things that you learned about yourself that you weren't allowed to do, or you weren't allowed to feel, or you weren't allowed to think, or you weren't allowed to dream, you took those and you hid them in your unconscious, and or our shadow. And you hid them so deeply that you don't even know what's in it. And so this is why we're afraid of our shadow, because there are hidden emotions in there, because emotions come with memories, emotions come with trauma. And if these are things that you were told about yourself that you've decided, other people decided, because it's other people that decided for us what was not acceptable. And if you have decided because other people told you that this was not acceptable, then you put it away. But what happens with the shadow is, because it is such a strong part, it is the stronger part of us. Our unconscious is a lot stronger than what we know. And so what's going to happen is it's constantly trying to come up for us to heal. And if we ignore the shadow, which most of us do, because let's face it, who wants to feel? Who wants to feel very painful emotions, especially if it's connected to our trauma? But the thing is here, there's also gifts that are in our shadow. And these are the things that we've wanted to do. These are the things that maybe we came here to do, but they were buried with everything else. And the way that we get to know our shadow and what's buried in it is, we just have to look at our relationships and look at a lot of the patterns that are coming up for us, because our shadow will keep repeating these patterns until we finally decide to face them. And that is the only way that we can, is to face the emotions and to go through the emotions and to start healing it. So let me walk you through the 4 steps that I use and continue to use to uncover my shadow and what's coming up for me to heal. And all the videos that I talk about in each step, you're going to find it below in the description box. Learning how to ground yourself is the first way to begin to face your shadow. According to cognitive neuroscientists, we are conscious of only about 5% of our cognitive activity. So most of our decisions, actions, emotions, and behavior depends on the 95% of brain activity that goes beyond our conscious awareness. So since the shadow lives in the unconscious, it is deeply affecting all of our actions, our thoughts, and our behaviors. That's strong. So learning how to ground ourselves is the first step that you're going to take that takes you out of your head and into your body. Because in the body is where all our emotions are. So in my case, because I had complex trauma, I spent a lot of time of my life in a dissociative state because that's how I dealt with pain. And dissociation means that you're just not in your body. And so when everything would come up from my shadow, I automatically, because it was my go-to and that's what I learned when I was younger, I would automatically dissociate, which meant that I came out of my body and I was in my head because I didn't want to feel what was in my body. So I'd like to teach you how to ground your mind and ground your body. So grounding helps you to become more aware of the present moment. But it takes a lot of practice because it's really important to know what it feels like when you're grounded and when you're ungrounded. So in my first video on grounding, how to ground yourself, I'm going to take you step by step on how to ground yourself properly. And I do this through exercises, so I'm going to show you how to ground yourself, how to ground your mind, and then ground your body. So you can get a really good idea of what it means to ground yourself. I think there's this general consensus out there that when you ground yourself, it brings you into this real Zen state. But it can actually mean the opposite. And that's exactly what I want to get into in this second video that I have, how to ground and center yourself properly. Grounding can bring out so many different emotions from our shadow. And that's why people don't want to ground into their body. But our emotions are meant to be expressed. They're actually meant to flow in and out of us. And we're meant to have a full range of emotions. And the problem is that a lot of us have these emotions that we can't express. And you hear stories about people that I'm not able to cry, or I have a hard time expressing anger, just because some of their emotions are buried inside. And then people that do express anger, and maybe in the form of rage, and that's because they have this ungrounded anger and they need to get angry. But instead of taking the time to ground their own anger and properly journal from it and ground into their body to heal it, it spews out. And that's like a lot of all of our emotions. It spews out on people that we don't want it to. And that's why it's so important to get back into the body so that you can stop the spinning and start to figure out what exactly you need to process from your shadow, which means a lot of emotions that are attached to it. So journaling is the tool that I use for my emotions. It's the number one tool. And after I've grounded, I can journal from whatever I'm feeling. So I can spew out everything on a page. Some of you might start off your journaling through writing on a page. I started out that way and now I do it on a computer. But I spew everything out on a daily basis. It could be 2-3 times a day, whatever I'm feeling, anything. So the journaling I do is called emotional journaling. I know there's a lot of different kinds of journaling out there. Things like gratitude lists or bullet journaling or manifestation journals never worked for me. It just didn't. So when I started my intensive shadow work journey about 7 years ago, emotional journaling was introduced to me and I hadn't heard of it then. So emotional journaling always starts off with a writing prompt. So let's take, for example, you're angry and somebody just pissed you off. And instead of shoving that down or hitting your fist on the wall or, taking it out on someone else, I go to my computer and I literally write, "You effing idiot," or "You piece of shit," or "You make me so angry." Whatever writing prompt, whatever comes to my head is the first line of my writing. Now I want to include for you a bonus here for you, and this is for the people that have stuck around. here's a list of writing prompts, and I'm going to put the link below in my guide for you that you can use when you're journaling and you're stuck and you don't know how to start your journaling. So let's take a look at these writing prompts that I have for you right now. And there's some on addiction, anger, anxiety, stress, body image, breakups, broken families, bullying, dating, depression, eating disorders, fear, friends, grief, loneliness, peer pressure, racism, rejection, self-harm, sex, sexual violence, sexual orientation, shame, guilt, STIs, suicidal thoughts, teen pregnancy. They're all there for you if you need them. And I mean, I've written a lot of self-hate things like, you piece of shit, you're worth nothing, I feel like nothing. Because this is a part that's inside of you that's holding this emotion. And it needs to be heard, and it needs you to listen to them. And it needs a place to go. If you don't give your emotions a voice, if you don't give them a place to go, they're just stuck in your shadow. And this is how you learn to process emotions, so that they heal. You want them to become grounded emotions rather than ungrounded, like anger, for example. So I have a few videos that I've done on journaling. My main video that I've done on journaling, I did that in 2020, and that was called How to Start a Journal for Mental Health. And after that, I wanted to do specific videos on how to journal from specific emotions. So you'll see that I'm going to include 5 smaller videos on depression, shame, anger, fear, and loneliness. You know, journaling has saved my life, literally, and I really mean that. When I get into a space where I just don't want to be on this planet anymore, and when those thoughts of suicidal ideation have come in too many times, that's what I write from. I write from what I want to do. And that is the only way that can get me out of it is through my journaling, because there is a part of you that feels that, especially if you have a lot of trauma in your background, in your childhood. Those thoughts are going to come up often. And when I hear that with people, I just wish that they would know that you can write from that part, because there is a part that doesn't want to be on this planet, and they need to be heard. So when you have all these thoughts racing in your head and you just can't get out of your head, sit down, take a piece of paper, get on the keyboard, and just write all those thoughts. And that's emotional journaling. This brings me to my next step, and that's how to process your emotions. So I want to ask you a few questions first. Were there certain emotions that you weren't allowed to have when you were a child? Were you called names like sucky baby, drama queen, cry baby, crazy man? Maybe you used your anger and you were punished for using your anger when you were younger. So maybe now you have anger issues or rage issues. Every single emotion we have is good. But unfortunately, some of us have trauma around these emotions that are buried. And until we heal these buried emotions, we're going to continue to repeat the same patterns around these emotions. So what's going to happen is all of these buried emotions that live in our shadow are going to come out in our relationships. Intimate partners, colleagues at work, friends, and in particular, family members as well. They will have a way of triggering you and bringing up all these emotions that you don't want to deal with. So here's the main video I have on how to process your emotions. And after that, what I've done is I've selected different emotions, and I have playlists on that. So I've selected shame, anger, fear, loneliness, suicidal ideation, depression, grief, and I think I've covered them all. So you're going to see in the description box below, under each of these emotions, I've included a few videos to help you out with them. You know, there are a lot of sayings out there that sometimes, you know, are sort of cliche, but there is one out there that says it all for me about processing emotions, and that's you have to feel in order to heal. There's just no way around it. And you know, it's going to keep coming back. We can try to numb it away, distract ourselves, but it's just going to keep coming up. And people are going to continue to trigger us. And that's going to bring me to my last point. And that's, we need to use our triggers as a gateway to uncover what's in our shadow. Let me explain that. I want to take the example of anxiety, because I've suffered from anxiety all my life. I know how it feels. So I'm a retired teacher, and I remember near the end of my career, anxiety was a big thing with students. It was never a word that was mentioned years ago, and I noticed that it became a big thing with teenagers, and a lot of them were suffering from it. And so one day I asked a teen, I said, what do you do about your anxiety? Because they were in the middle of talking about their anxiety, and she was just talking like it was something she's just accepted about herself, that she has it. And so I said, what do you do when your anxiety comes up? How do you deal with it? Because I was really interested. And she just said, I just smoke weed. And the student was no different than any of us, because we all have coping mechanisms when we're triggered. When our shadow is triggered, that means it's because somebody said something to us, somebody did something to us, we've smelled something that reminded us of something, we're in a place that reminds us of something, and then this feeling comes up, or this nervous system gets out of whack, and fear comes in our chest, and our stomach feels horrible, or you know what your signs are. We go to our thing that's going to numb it. And for me, it was food for a number of years. And then I started to learn about triggers in my therapy and how I needed to pay attention to them. Because what triggers me is not necessarily going to trigger the person that's standing beside me when something happens or somebody says something. So that particular trigger was meant for me. It wasn't meant for the person next to me. And so I started to realize that triggers are meant for you. They're not done to you. That means I'm going to use them as a gateway to what my shadow is trying to tell me. So if I become really angry about what somebody just said to me, then I have to figure out where or why I'm angry. And I do that through my emotional journaling. So I'll go to my journal and I'll say, whatever you just did, you pissed me off. And I just keep on journaling to figure out, where did that anger, why did that person make me angry? Where's that coming from? And that's how triggers work. But people take triggers, they'll get triggered at work, for example, and somebody at work made them upset, and they'll stew over it for a long time and maybe even decide they're going to hate that person. But a lot of times when you get triggered by people, they're reminding you of something, they're reminding you of somebody in your life, and it's there for you to figure out, because it's a gateway to what's hidden, to the pain that you've hidden away in your shadow. And so I realized that I could no longer ignore my triggers if I wanted to heal, because they almost were like a gift for me to, when they came up, I went, well, that's what I got to heal. And now I've worked through a lot of my trauma, but as soon as I get triggered about something, I know that's something I have to write about. So I've spent a lot of time making videos on triggering, because it's so important, because it's a gateway to uncovering what's in your shadow. And they're all here in the guide below. So I think I've come to the end now, and this teacher has given you enough homework to get you started for sure. But what I do want to say to you is, because I've been on this journey for a while now, and it's been quite intense, I do want to say to you that you can do this. You can face your shadow. And just because you've decided at a very young age, or someone else has decided for you, that you're not worthy of certain things, or you can't do certain things in your life, or you can't, walk towards a different direction in your life, that doesn't mean that there are these shameful and bad parts of you that exist. You have to start to realize that the things that your mind is telling you, the thoughts in your head, your belief systems, your patterns, your conditioning, are not yours. It's not your authentic self. Your authentic self is buried in your shadow. It's buried in the unconscious. And your journey in life that you undertake, your journey to get to know yourself, your journey to get to know the most authentic part of yourself, is the most important and most courageous journey that you'll ever do. Once you start working through your shadow, you're going to find out who you are. And you're also going to find out that you have a purpose for being here. So it's time to take off the mask and reveal the real you.